Because you know when there is a father who wants to be seen, who wants to be present in his son's life, who wants to be recognized not as father of, but as a person. This is the story of such a father. Dell Curry is 65 years old. He was a professional basketball player. But that was a very long time ago. You can tell when there is a person whose past is glorious, but distant. Dell is the father of Stephen Curry, one of the greatest basketball players in NBA history. 50 championships, MVPs, legends of the game. But this is Stephen's story, not Dell's. At least, it used to be. You can tell when there is a person who has become father of. During Stephen's career, Dell was there. Physically, sometimes, but emotionally? Dell made himself invisible. Because he believed Stephen had no time for a father. Because he believed his place was one of support, not presence. Because he believed a man his age had no value in that world. You can tell when there is a person who makes himself invisible by choice. Now that Stephen is an adult, a champion, is everything. Dell feels emptiness because he sacrificed 20 years of relationship with his son, because he was so busy being the father who supports that he forgot to be a person. You can tell when there is a truth that arrives too late. But Dell thinks, there is still time. I can still reconnect. I can still be seen by my son. You can tell when there is hope that is fragile, but persistent. One day, Dell decides, I am going to do something special. I am going to create a moment Stephen cannot ignore. I am going to show that I am a person who deserves to be in his life. You can tell when there is a person who makes the decision to change. Dell chooses a 5-star hotel, a sophisticated place where Stephen would probably feel comfortable. Dell makes a reservation for 2 people, one for himself, one for Stephen, because he wants to offer, come meet your father. You can tell when there is a gesture that is a request for reconnection. Dell buys new clothes, haircut, beard trimmed, good shoes, because he wants to look like someone who deserves to be in a place like that. Because he feels that if he does not make an effort, he will be invisible again. You can tell when there is a person who tries to make himself visible. Dell arrives at the hotel, a specific day, a specific time. Heart racing because he is nervous. Because this is exposure. He is asking to be seen. You can tell when. There is vulnerability that is physical. The hotel entrance is elegant. Well-dressed people. Dell feels small despite his height. Because age marks a person in ways that new clothes cannot mask. Because the world sees a 65-year-old man trying to look younger. You can tell when there is a truth that is humiliating. Dell approaches the reception desk. The receptionist is young, beautiful, professional. Hello, sir. How can I help you? Dell responds, I have a reservation. The name is Dell Curry. You can tell when there is a moment that is a turning point. The receptionist searches the system. A few seconds that feel like an eternity. Ah, yes, Dell Curry. Let me check something. She disappears. Returns with the manager. You can tell when there is a change in dynamics that is clear. The manager is a 50-year-old man. Impeccable. He looks at Dell in a way that is clearly judgment. Mr. Curry, I have bad news about your reservation. Dell feels weight in his chest because he knows what is coming. What is the problem? Asks Dell calmly. You can tell when there is a person who is already prepared for rejection. Well, sir, it seems there is an issue with your account. What issue? The reservation was confirmed. Yes, but our property policy requires certain guest standards. You can tell when there is a euphemism that is clear. You are not welcome here. Dell understands. This is not about the reservation. It is about Dell's appearance. It is about Dell's age. It is about the value that the system assigns to Dell. You can tell when there is a moment that is pure injustice. Are you saying I am going to be rejected because of my appearance? Asks Dell. The manager retreats slightly. Sir, it is not that simple. It is our policy. Your policy rejects 65-year-old men? Silence. Because there is no answer that sounds good. You can tell when there is a truth that no one wants to say out loud. I am sorry, sir. Your reservation has been cancelled. I cannot help you. You can tell when there is a rejection that is final. Dell feels humiliation, not because it is a rejection, but because it is a public rejection, because other people in the lobby are watching, because it is clear. Dell is a man who is not good enough for this place. You can tell when there is a death of hope that is public. Dell tries to maintain his dignity. I understand. Very well. He turns to leave. But inside, he is broken. You can tell when there is a person who maintains composure while dying inside. He leaves the hotel, walks along the streets, touches the phone in his pocket. There is a message from Stephen. Hi, Dad. How are you? A routine message. Filial, but empty. Dell does not respond. Because what would he say? I tried to get closer to you and was rejected for being old and invisible. You can tell when there is a person who suffers alone. He goes home, dark, silent, sits in a chair, processes what happened. Because he understood. This was not about the hotel. It was about himself. It was about a truth he already knew. He was invisible. You can tell when there is a truth that is devastating. Dell thinks about Stephen. About 20 years of being by his side, but not present. About 20 years of believing he was support, not a person. About 20 years of making himself small so that Stephen could be great. You can tell when there is remorse that is profound. And now, when he tries to be seen by Stephen. The literal world does not allow it. Because Dell is invisible. You can tell when there is a truth that is complete. Dell will not tell Stephen. Because he does not want to burden his son. Because Dell believes he deserved this. Because Dell believes it is fair. An invisible man is rejected by a hotel. Because Dell has internalized his own lack of worth. You can tell when there is a person who believes in their own cruel judgment. Dell's night is lonely. No crying. No drama. Just silence. Because this is the story of a man who suffers in silence. Of a father who sacrificed so much. Of a person who became invisible. And when he tries to be seen, the world says, "You are not welcome here." You can tell when there is a truth that is final. Stephen Curry is at practice. A normal day. Normal basketball. Mind on the game, as always. He does not know that life is about to change. You can tell when there is a person who is living before the transformation. In the Friends WhatsApp group, there is a video. Dude, look at this! Security footage from the hotel. Shows a man being rejected at the reception desk. A well-dressed man, but clearly older. A man who is being humiliated. You can tell when there is a video that is evidence of injustice. Someone comments, like, "Why are they rejecting the guy like that?" Another responds, "Must be some classist bullshit policy." A third person says, "Wait, that face." You can tell when there is a moment where recognition changes everything. That is Steph Curry's dad. Comments explode. What? No, seriously. Oh my God, that's Dell. What disrespect. The video starts circulating because it is the perfect story. Famous son, father being disrespected. You can tell when there is a narrative that is irresistible. Stephen is in the locker room after practice. His phone does not stop vibrating. Messages, calls, notifications. Did you see the news? Your dad in the viral video? Dude, what happened? Stephen opens Twitter and sees his father being publicly rejected, sees his father in a moment of humiliation, sees his father being treated like nothing. You can tell when there is a moment that is pure shock. Stephen watches the video several times, watching Dell's expression, watching how the manager treats him, watching how the world passes by Dell without seeing him. You can tell when there is understanding that arrives with anger. First thing, Stephen calls his father. Dad, why didn't you tell me? Dell responds with a calm that is heartbreaking. Oh, Stephen, it was not a big deal. Not a big deal? You were humiliated. No, son. I just understood that I am not welcome there. This is not their fault. You can tell when there is a person who internalizes their own contempt. Dad, you are welcome anywhere. You are Dell Curry. You are my father. You deserved respect. Stephen is furious, but not with Dell, with the system, with the hotel, with the world that made his father invisible. You can tell when there is understanding that is transformative. Stephen processes what he saw and understands something greater. This is not about a hotel rejecting a man. It is about 20 years of Dell being invisible. It is about a father who sacrificed so that his son could be great. And now, when he tries to be seen, he is rejected. You can tell when there is a truth that is systemic. Stephen thinks about his career, about Dell in the background, about every game Dell watched, about every moment Dell was support instead of presence, about how Dell made himself small so that Stephen could be great. You can tell when there is remorse that is filial. Stephen understands this needs to change now, because his father deserved better, because his father deserved to be honored, because his father deserved that the world would see. You can tell when there is determination that is absolute. Stephen calls Dell again. Dad, I am going to do something. No, Stephen, you don't need to. This is not about needing. It is about you deserving. It is about the world understanding who you are. It is about me showing the world. My father is my hero. You can tell when there is a promise that is filial. Dell tries to argue, but Stephen has a determination that cannot be questioned. Because this is not about Stephen being famous. It is about Dell being a father. You can tell when there is an inversion that changes roles. Stephen spends the entire night planning. Because this cannot be simple. This cannot be just Stephen goes to the hotel. This has to be a moment. This has to be something the world sees. You can tell when there is a person who uses their platform to honor. Stephen speaks with his agent. Tomorrow, I am going to do something that will be seen by the world. This involves my father and the injustice he suffered. Get the cameras ready. Get the press ready. Because the world is going to hear. You can tell when there is a person who takes action. Stephen's night is busy, but it is a busyness that is purpose. Because finally, Stephen is going to honor his father publicly. You can tell when there is a moment that changes everything. Morning arrives. Stephen wakes up early. Determination is visible in his eyes, because he knows what he is going to do, and he knows the world is going to hear. You can tell when there is a person with absolute purpose. Stephen puts on simple clothes, because this is not about his status. It is about his father's honor. He leaves home without saying much, but the press camera sees him leaving, because someone tipped them off, because the world knows something is going to happen. You can tell when there is an expectation that is palpable. He arrives at the hotel, the same hotel that rejected his father. He enters calmly, but with a dignity that is unequivocal. You can tell when there is a person who enters a space and changes it. He goes straight to the reception desk. The manager sees Stephen Curry walking in, recognizes him immediately. Because how could he not recognize him? Stephen is one of the greatest NBA players. You can tell when there is a truth that is instant recognition. The manager stands up, fake smile. Mr. Curry, what an honor. Stephen does not return the smile. You recognize me now? Excuse me. Yesterday, you rejected my father. You humiliated him in front of the world. You said he was not adequate. You can tell when there is an accusation that is clear. The manager turns pale. Mr. Curry, I did not know he was your... Ah, there it is. You would have recognized him if I had told you he was Stephen Curry's father. But when he was just an elderly man, when he was just a man who had no apparent value, you rejected him. You can tell when there is a truth that is named with justified anger. Stephen turns to the press cameras that are filming. I want the world to see this. I want the world to hear this. My father is Dell Curry. My father is the most dignified man I know. My father sacrificed 20 years to be by my side. You can tell when there is a confession that is filial. My father is the reason I am who I am. My father paved the way for me to be great. And yesterday, this hotel rejected him, because apparently, sacrifice is not adequate for 5 stars. You can tell when there is an accusation that is systemic. My father was rejected because he is 65 years old. My father was rejected because he had no apparent status. My father was rejected because the system is built to make men like him invisible. You can tell when there is a truth that is educational. But I want the world to know. I want you to understand. When you reject my father, you reject value. When you make a man invisible, you commit a crime. You can tell when there is a person who uses their voice for the voiceless. Stephen turns to the manager. You have a choice here. You can publicly apologize, or you can live with the consequence of disrespecting Dell Curry. And I will make sure the world knows. You can tell when there is a person who has power and uses it correctly. The manager is in panic. Mr. Curry, I sincerely apologize. This was a mistake. Your father deserved to be welcomed here. Deserved more than welcomed. Deserved honor. But Stephen is not interested in apologies, because apologies do not repair 20 years. You can tell when there is anger that is just. Stephen leaves the hotel, but before he does, he says something the world will never forget. My father is in my heart. My father is in everything I do. If you cannot see this, then the problem is yours, not his. You can tell when there is a truth that is final. The streets explode with reactions. Dell Curry deserves better starts trending globally, because Stephen did something the world rarely sees. A son publicly honoring his father. A son using his platform not for himself, but to recognize paternal sacrifice. You can tell when there is an action that transcends sports. The press is going crazy. Interviews are requested. The world wants to know more about Dell, because now Dell is visible, not because he is Stephen's father, but because he is a man who was disrespected and recognized by his son. You can tell when there is a narrative that changes. The hotel receives letters from guests. I am canceling my reservation. I do not support a hotel that rejects people, especially people who have true value. Because the world saw, when you reject Dell, you reject decency. You can tell when there is a movement that is organic. Athletes start to comment. This is the model for how we should honor fathers. This is how we show respect. This is how we say, you matter. Because Stephen opened a door that the world needed to open. You can tell when there is an action that is exemplary. After Stephen's action, the world is in chaos. Dell Curry deserves better is trending globally. Social media explodes with similar stories. My father was also rejected. My father is also invisible. Thank you, Stephen, for naming it. Because Stephen opened a door that the world did not know existed. You can tell when there is an action that unleashes a movement. But for Dell and Stephen, the story is private. Stephen goes to Dell's house that night, alone. No cameras, no press, just father and son. You can tell when there is an AV encounter that is sacred. Dell is at home. He saw everything Stephen did, slowly processing what it means. When Stephen walks in, Dell cannot speak. Because he is crying, you can tell when there is a man who is finally seen. Stephen embraces his father, and in that embrace, there are 20 years of forgiveness. There are 20 years of, I am sorry for not being present. There are 20 years of, I am sorry for letting you be invisible. You can tell when there is an embrace that is a confession. Dad, I am so sorry. I am sorry for not having seen you. I am sorry for letting you be invisible. I am sorry for not honoring you all these years. You can tell when there is filial guilt that is true. Dell responds with a trembling voice. Stephen, it is not your fault. I chose to be invisible. I chose to believe I had no value. I chose to make myself small so that you could be great. You can tell when there is a truth that is self-revelatory. But you were wrong, says Stephen. I needed you to be great too. I needed you to be present. I needed my father. You can tell when there is a filial confession that is vulnerable. Dell sits down and begins to tell stories he never told. About sacrifices, about the pressure of being Stephen Curry's father, about the fear of not being good enough, about the belief that his place was support, not presence. You can tell when there is a confession that is profound. Dad, you were always enough. More than enough. You were everything. Stephen is crying too, because finally, father and son are seeing each other, not as Stephen Curry and his father, but as two men who love each other. You can tell when there is an encounter that is transformative. They talk for hours about life, about choices, about pressure, about invisibility. Stephen offers, Dad, I am going to introduce you to the world. I am going to show who you are. I am going to make sure you are seen. Dell responds, I don't need to be seen by the world, Stephen. I just needed to be seen by you. You can tell when there is a truth that is complete. But Stephen insists, Because he understood. When a father is honored, all fathers are honored. When you recognize paternal sacrifice, the world changes. You can tell when there is an understanding that is systemic. Days later, Stephen makes a public post. I want everyone to see my father the way I see him. Not as Stephen Curry's father, but as Dell Curry, a man who sacrificed everything. A man who is my hero. A man who deserved to have been honored from the beginning. You can tell when there is a public declaration that is filial. The post is shared millions of times because it touches something universal. Because many fathers were invisible. Because many sons finally see. You can tell when there is a movement that is cultural. For you who are an invisible father. For you who sacrificed and were not recognized. For you who believe you have no value. For you who became father of. Dell offers a message. Your value was never determined by recognition. Your value is intrinsically you. But the world needs to hear this. The world needs to be reminded. The world needs to be forced to see. You can tell when there is a message that is universal. For you who are a son. For you who saw your father be invisible. For you who want to honor. For you who have power and want to use it well. Stephen offers a demonstration. Real power is not about you. It is about elevating those who sacrificed. It is about making sure that invisibility is seen. It is about honoring, not to receive praise, but because it is right. You can tell when there is a lesson that is ethical. 1 year later, Dell and Stephen are inseparable. Publicly, not as the famous one and his father, but as friends, as family, as two men who love each other. Because finally, Dell was seen, not by Stephen's fame, but by Stephen choosing to see him. You can tell. When there is a choice, that is love. The world continues to respond. Honor of fathers starts trending. Sons begin to honor fathers publicly. Fathers begin to be recognized. The system begins to change. Because Stephen opened a door, and Dell was the first person to walk through it. You can tell when there is an action that transforms a narrative.